Apache sisters sold like cattle. Lonely rancher who bought them said, "Let's go home." The dust kicked up by dozens of horses and wagons hung in the air like a brown curtain over the makeshift auction ground outside Tombstone. The 3rd of October, 1881, a date that would burn itself into my memory forever, not because of its cruelty, but because of the strange beginning it brought. I couldn't close my eyes, even though I wanted to. The desert wind blew in hot gusts, carrying the smell of the crowd's sweat, horse manure, and the bitter taste of human cruelty. I squeezed my sister Ayana's hand, trying to create an invisible wall to shield her from the lewd eyes that were scrutinizing us. It had all happened so fast. A month ago, we were still in our small village, living a peaceful life, learning to farm and care for our animals. Then they came not soldiers, but a group of bounty hunters, with long hunting rifles and brutal promises. They destroyed everything, captured us, and brought us here, to this place these white men called civilization. I wonder, is anyone out there watching this story? If so, let us know in the comments what country you're watching from. We love connecting with our global community. I've lived long enough to know that there is no justice in this land. Justice only comes from a knife's edge and a brave heart. But right now, we had neither. The rough ropes chafed my wrists and ankles, reminding me of my position. Merchandise, nothing more. Ayana, my sister, was only 19. Her eyes still held a hint of innocence, but fear was now etched there. I tried to pass her some strength through the squeeze of my hand, but I knew my own heart was breaking. Jed Blackwood, the auctioneer, stood on a high wooden platform, hawking us like livestock. He was a balding man with a wrinkled face and a disgusting smirk. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out in his oily, reedy voice, "we have some fine specimens today. 2 Apache sisters, I'm told." He turned to us, his grin widening like a knife about to cut into flesh. "Look at these fine specimens, young, strong, and I guarantee they'll work hard with the proper motivation." The lewd chuckles from the crowd made my stomach turn. The men, a mix of miners and ranchers, looked at us with undisguised intentions. They examined us like they were inspecting horses, checking our teeth and muscles, discussing our potential uses. I had experienced much cruelty, but nothing had prepared me for this open, casual, and shameless kind of brutality. I felt Ayana trembling, but I stood tall. I would not bow my head. I would not let them see my weakness. My eyes burned with fury and defiance. Blackwood saw it, and he took a step back, as if afraid I might bite him. "The older one's got some fire in her," he said. "Might need some breaking in, but I assure you she'll be worth the effort. The younger one's more docile, perfect for household duties." He was talking about us like we were animals, and the casual cruelty of it made me sick to my core. "We'll start the bidding at $50 for the pair," Blackwood shouted. Hands shot up around the crowd. $60, $75, $100. My horror grew as the bidding escalated. I realized these weren't men looking for workers. These were men with darker intentions, and I could see it in their faces. I had heard about women being sold, being treated like slaves, but I never imagined it would happen to me. In that crowd, I saw a man. He was in his 40s, with salt and pepper hair and tired but deep-set eyes. He wore an old leather coat, and his hands were clenched into fists. His eyes held none of the vulgarity of the others, but rather a kind of anger and a familiar sadness. His gaze seemed to have seen too much of the world's cruelty. For a moment, we stared at each other across the crowd. It wasn't a plea for help. I was too proud to beg. It was a question, a challenge. Are you going to stand there and watch? Or are you going to do something? $150. A heavy-set man I recognized as Tom Crawford, a mine owner notorious for his abuse of women, shouted. $175. The price climbed, and so did the despair within me. Ayana had begun to tremble, though she still held her head high like me. $250. Crawford roared, and the crowd fell silent. It was a huge sum. Most people in this territory didn't see that kind of money in 6 months. Going once, Going twice. Blackwood called out, his eyes gleaming with greed. I thought it was over. I was ready for the worst. But then I heard a deep voice echoing through the crowd. $300. All eyes turned to that white man, the one with the tired but unyielding eyes. Crawford glared at him with open hostility. $325, he growled. $350, the man replied without hesitation. $400, Crawford snarled. $500, the man said clearly. The crowd gasped. It was an enormous sum, more than many people earned in a year. Crawford looked like he wanted to continue, but even his greed had its limits. Going once, going twice. Sold. Blackwood banged his gavel. The Apache sisters go to Mr. Coleman for $500. I couldn't believe my ears. Even as he pushed through the crowd to complete the transaction, I couldn't trust it. I heard the whispers follow me. What's Cole want with two savages? I thought he was still mourning his wife. I ignored them. Blackwood, rubbing his hands together with glee, congratulated Cole. Cole simply handed over the money without a word, then turned to look at us. I looked into his eyes, the eyes of a former soldier. I saw conflict there, regret, and something else. He came to us, our hands still bound. "What are your names?" he asked in the little Apache I remembered from my military days. I looked at him. I didn't answer. "I asked your names," he repeated in English. "Kaya Nightwind," I said, my voice steady, not trembling. "This is my sister, Ayana." "Good," he said. "Kaya and Ayana, we have a long ride ahead of us." As we walked to his wagon, Sheriff Mason, a smirk on his face, approached. "Coleman," he said, "hope you know what you're doing. Apache women can be unpredictable." "I can handle myself," Cole replied. "Just remember, they're your property now. Anything happens, any trouble they cause, it's on your head. Property." The word made my skin crawl, but Cole just nodded and climbed into the wagon seat. As the wagon rolled out of Tombstone, I caught my reflection in the side mirror. I whispered to Ayana in Apache, trying to make sense of everything. "I don't know who he is. Don't trust him." I couldn't blame Ayana for being terrified. We rode in silence for an hour. The sound of the wagon wheels and the horses' hooves were the only sounds. Finally, Ayana spoke in hesitant English. Where are we going?" Cole turned back to look at us, the two young women whose lives he had just purchased for $500. He had made a decision that would change everything. "Home," he said simply. "I'm taking you home." I saw confusion in Ayana's eyes, but also the first glimmer of hope. I didn't understand what he meant, but I would soon enough. His name was Cole, and he called this remote ranch home. But to me, it was just another cage, albeit a more finely decorated and cleaner one. We were there, at the Red Canyon Ranch, a place lonely to its core, where the red cliffs rose around us like the fingers of an angry god, and the air seemed thick with loneliness. The house was huge, but it was cold and empty, just like its owner. Every time the desert wind blew through, it shrieked like a ghost, as if telling a tragic story that had once unfolded here. In those first few days, I lived like a trapped animal. All my senses were on high alert. I observed everything, from the direction of the wind to the sound of Cole's footsteps. I didn't dare speak, only kept a watchful eye on Cole from a distance, listening to his every move. Every word, every gesture of his was a puzzle I had to solve. When he worked in the stables, I saw the calluses on his hands, the scars of a man who had once held a gun and fought. But when he thought no one was watching, I saw a deep sadness in his eyes, a kind of grief I was all too familiar with. Ayana was different. My sister was still too naive to understand the pain and loss. She had been hurt by the men who captured us, but the trust in her was not yet completely dead. An older woman, Doña Elena, who took care of this house, became a source of comfort for Ayana. Doña Elena, with her kind heart, worried about us like we were her own children. She spoke to us in Spanish mixed with a little Apache, giving us clean clothes, preparing food, and providing us with a private room upstairs. The room was clean and had a soft bed, but I felt a deep sense of alienation, as if it was not a place where we belonged. Every night, I lay in bed, listening to Ayana's quiet breathing, and looked out the window at the moonlit red cliffs. I still whispered to her in Apache, as a reminder to myself, "Don't trust. You must be vigilant. Nothing is ever free." But Ayana, with her gentle nature, had begun to open up to Doña Elena, letting her offer comfort, letting her embrace her like a mother. When I saw that, a strange feeling crept into my heart. On one hand, I was happy my sister found some solace. On the other, I felt terrified, afraid she would be deceived, afraid this kindness was just a clever trap. I still kept my distance, watching everything with suspicious eyes. I couldn't let them take advantage of Ayana. Every time Cole tried to talk to me, I replied with only short, blunt answers. I had to know who he was. I had to understand his motives. I couldn't let myself and Ayana fall into an even worse situation. One morning, while Cole was feeding the horses, I decided to confront him. I wore a clean dress that Doña Elena had given me, but I still moved like a warrior, always ready for danger. I stood leaning against the stable doorway, looking straight at him. "You speak some Apache," I said, my voice cold and direct, without a greeting. "A little," he replied. "I learned it during my time in the cavalry." His words were like a knife cutting into my old wound. "You fought against my people," I said. It wasn't a question. He had killed people like me, destroyed my village, and now he was trying to show kindness. He was silent, waiting for my next question. "So how many did you kill?" I asked, my question direct and unafraid. He was surprised, his eyes evading mine for a moment. "I don't know," he replied. "It was war. Men died on both sides. Women and children, too. But I never killed women or children. Never." I looked straight into his eyes, trying to read the lies. "Why should I believe you?" I asked. "I have seen men like you. They came to our village and spoke kind words. But then they took everything. They promised peace but brought war. Are you different from them?" "Because I'm telling you the truth," he replied, his voice more certain. "And because if I meant you harm, I wouldn't have bothered cutting your ropes that night." The accusation hit me like a slap. "Or perhaps you just prefer your victims willing," I countered, my voice laced with sarcasm. He was silent, then returned to his work, brushing down a horse. "Maybe," he said slowly, "or maybe I'm exactly who I told you I was, a man trying to do the right thing." "And what is the right thing?" I asked. "What do you expect from us, Cole Coleman?" "Nothing. I expect nothing from you except to be treated with the same respect I show you." "Respect?" I laughed bitterly. "You bought us like horses or cattle. Is that respect?" "Number. What happened in Tombstone was wrong. I'm sorry it happened to you, but I can't undo it. All I can do is try to make things right from here on." I watched him brush down the horse in silence. His words weren't convincing, but his patience was. He didn't react to my hostility, but only looked straight at me, never flinching. "My sister thinks you might be different," I said. "She's always been too trusting." "And you?" he asked. I looked him straight in the eyes. "I think white men are good at saying pretty words when it serves their purpose." My words hung in the air, a wall between us. I knew that words weren't enough to earn my trust. He had to prove himself with actions, and I would wait. I would watch. I would never let my guard down. 2 weeks had passed since we were brought here, and the Red Canyon Ranch had slowly become a strange part of my life. A fragile routine had been established. Ayana had adapted quickly, helping Doña Elena with the household chores, and slowly beginning to smile again. But I did not. I lived with a heightened sense of vigilance, always watching, waiting for something terrible to happen. I helped Cole with the horses, but I didn't speak. I watched the way he worked, the way he treated the animals, the way he spoke with Doña Elena. I had come to one realization. He was a man of actions, not words. Words can be lies, but actions cannot. I saw his patience, his gentleness when he fixed something that was broken, and the loneliness in his eyes. Although my guard was still up, within my heart, a seed of trust had begun to sprout. On a hot, sun-scorched morning, the sound of hoofbeats echoed from a distance. Cole was mending a fence when he stopped, listening. It was a familiar sound, a sound of danger, My heart pounded. I saw a large cloud of dust rolling up. Sheriff Mason, with his usual sneering face, was leading the way, accompanied by Jed Blackwood and 2 armed thugs with rifles on their shoulders. They had come. I clenched my fists, adrenaline rushing through my veins. I wanted to run, to hide somewhere, but I couldn't leave Ayanna alone. I went toward the house and took her hand. "We'll be okay," I whispered, though I wasn't sure myself if we would be. Cole walked toward us, placing himself between us and the men, like a protective wall. "Coleman," Sheriff Mason called out, his face full of mockery. "Heard you got some new property. We got a tip that you're harboring fugitives." Cole looked straight at Mason, his eyes cold and resolute. "They are not slaves, and they are not fugitives, Mason. They are my guests." Blackwood scoffed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Guests? Don't be a fool, Coleman. They are wild animals. They'll turn on you soon enough." I couldn't stand it anymore. I stepped out from behind Cole. "We are people, not animals," I said. My English not perfect but very clear. "We have names. We have family." Mason looked me up and down, his face full of contempt. Well, the savage can speak English. How civilized." His words made me furious, but I had learned to control myself. "I speak 3 languages," I replied, "Apache, Spanish, and English." "How many do you speak, Sheriff?" Mason's face flushed with anger. He stepped closer, but Cole moved to block him. "That's enough," Cole said, his voice full of authority. "State your business, or get off my property now." Jed Blackwood, not one to miss an opportunity, got straight to the point. "We're here to reclaim our merchandise. A bounty hunter has filed a claim that these 2 savages are military prisoners on the run. We want them back, or you pay us a compensation of $1,000. It was a blatant lie. He wanted us back to sell us again. Cole let out a humorless laugh, but his eyes were not smiling. "That's extortion, Blackwood. And I don't pay men like you." "Then you've stolen military prisoners," Mason said. "I'll have to arrest you. A terrible shame, really." The situation was at a breaking point. 4 armed men stood opposite Cole, a solitary man. Cole slowly lifted his rifle, pointing it directly at Jed Blackwood. "You have 10 seconds to get off my land before I start shooting." Blackwood let out a hearty laugh. "You think you can fight all of us? Try me," Cole said. I squeezed Ayanna's hand, ready for the worst. In that moment, I looked at Cole, and my feelings were no longer of suspicion, but of admiration. He had chosen to protect us, accepting the danger. He had proven himself with his actions. And then, the sound of other horses' hooves echoed from the distance. Doc Cooper, the only doctor in Tombstone whom I felt I could trust, rode up, followed by 2 men with federal badges on their chests. "Gentlemen," Doc Cooper said, "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Blackwood's and Mason's faces turned pale. "Federal marshals," Doc Cooper said. "They have authority over local law. They've been looking for an illegal slave trader, and I think we found him." Jed Blackwood and his thugs were arrested, and Sheriff Mason stood there, unable to do a thing. After everything was over, Cole and I stood on the porch, looking out at the desert as it slowly turned red. "Thank you," I said, my voice softer than it had ever been. "For what?" he asked. "For not handing us over. It would have been easier for you." Cole turned to look at me, his eyes warm and sincere. "I don't do things because they're easy." I felt a sense of relief wash over me, and a feeling of safety I hadn't felt in a very long time. I looked at him, and for the first time, I was no longer looking at an enemy. I was looking at a man, a good man. Spring came early to the Red Canyon Valley that year. It brought with it a sense of renewal that crept into every corner of the ranch. 3 months had passed since the day Sheriff Mason and Jed Blackwood were arrested. 3 months of peace and a feeling of safety that I thought I had lost forever. The house, which had once been cold and empty, was now alive. Every morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Doña Elena muttering prayers in Spanish. Ayana had found her laugh again, and her singing traditional Apache songs now filled the empty spaces in the house, bringing a gentle music I never thought I would hear again. I had slowly found my place here. With the instincts of an Apache raised in nature, I had learned to care for the cattle and gentle the wild horses. I had a unique ability to read their emotions, and Cole had acknowledged it. He taught me how to care for an injured horse, and I taught him how to read the subtle signs that a horse gives. Each day, we worked side by side, our hands brushing, our shoulders touching. We didn't need many words. Our eyes were enough to understand each other. He was no longer the strange white man. He was Cole, the man who had saved us, the man who had protected us, and the man who had given me a second chance at life. Ayana had blossomed like a desert flower after the rain. She had learned English quickly, and now she could converse with Cole and Doña Elena with ease. She had taken over much of the cooking, bringing Apache recipes into the kitchen and creating the most flavorful meals I had ever tasted. She had become a part of this family, and I, as her older sister, felt prouder and happier than ever before. We had become a family, a strange family, with a white man, 2 Apache sisters, and a Mexican woman. But it was my family. On a warm spring morning, while I was in the stables with Cole, Doña Elena rushed out, her face beaming with a strange joy. "Señor Cole, Señorita Kaya," she called out. "There's news." My heart tightened, and a vague sense of dread washed over me. 3 months of peace had made me forget that the outside world still existed. Cole and I hurried into the house. I found Ayana in the kitchen, holding a piece of paper, tears streaming down her face. I rushed to her side. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Nothing's wrong," Ayana said, but her tears still fell. "Everything is right." She handed me the paper, and I read it. It was a telegram from Washington, D.C. To Kaya and Ayana Nightwind. "Stop regarding Apache land right settlement. Stop your family claim recognized by federal court. Stop compensation awarded for stolen lands. Stop amount $35,000. Stop, please. Contact immediately. Stop." I read the telegram again and again. $35,000. It was an enormous sum, a fortune. I couldn't believe my eyes. "Grandfather filed this claim 20 years ago," Ayana said, her voice shaking with joy. "Before he died, he told us about it, but we never thought anything would come of it." My own tears began to fall, not from sadness, but from relief and a sense of hope. After I calmed down, I looked at Cole. His face was full of joy for us, but in his eyes I saw a hidden sadness. He had read the unspoken meaning behind the telegram. With this money, we no longer had to depend on him. We could go anywhere. We could buy our own ranch, live the free life we had always dreamed of. We could leave. This fear hit me hard. I had grown to love this place. I loved Ayana, Doña Elena, and I had fallen in love with him. "This is wonderful," Cole said, trying to hide his sorrow. "You too can start a new life. Buy your own ranch, a big house in San Francisco, anything you want." He was saying the words I had once dreamed of, but now they only sounded like a goodbye. "What makes you think we want to go anywhere?" I asked, my voice filled with a new resolve. "Well, with that kind of money, you could have anything," he said. "And leave you?" Ayana asked, her voice innocent. "Leave our home?" "This isn't really your home," Cole said, his voice trembling slightly. "You just ended up here by accident." It was then that I understood. He wasn't afraid of losing us. He was afraid of losing himself. He had lived a lonely life for so long, and he had found us, found a family, found a purpose. "No," I said. "We didn't end up here by accident. We ended up here because a man cared enough to save us when no one else would, because a man offered us love when the world had shown us only cruelty." I stood up and walked over to Cole. My gaze was no longer the suspicious gaze of a warrior, but the resolute gaze of a woman who had found love. "Now we have a choice," I said, "a real choice." Cole looked at me, his eyes filled with both hope and fear. "And I choose to stay here, with the man I love." My words stunned him. "Kaya, you love me," he said, his voice shaking. Yes, I said. I tried to deny it. I tried to convince myself it was just gratitude, but it's not. I love your kindness, your strength, your wounded heart that still finds room for others. I love the way you treat my sister like she is precious. I love the man you have become. Ayana smiled through her tears. And I love having a big brother who protects us and makes us feel safe. Why would we want to leave that? Tears began to roll down Cole's face. Are you sure? Really sure? Because once you stay, once we build this life together, I don't think I could survive losing you again. Then don't lose us, I said, stepping closer. Marry me, Cole Coleman. Make this family official. I had dreamed of this moment, but I never believed it could be real. He wanted to marry me, despite everything that had happened. Especially because of everything you have been through, I said. Your past made you the man who could save us. Your pain helped you understand ours. I looked at these two incredible people who had brought light back into my dark world, and I made the easiest decision of my life. Yes, he said, pulling me into his arms. Yes, I will marry you. You can both stay here forever if you want. Actually, Ayana said with a mischievous smile, we have a better idea. What is that? I asked. We want to use the money to expand the ranch, buy more land, build a bigger house, and create a place not just for us, but for other people who need help. Her vision was beautiful and ambitious. That would be dangerous, Cole said. Many people won't like it. Then we'll change their minds, Ayana said with a newfound confidence. One person at a time, just like you changed us. 6 months later, on a crisp October morning, we were in the valley below the Red Cliffs, where it was not just a wedding, but the beginning of a legend. The brilliant sunlight shone down, making the red rocks more radiant than ever, as if they too were blessing us. The air was no longer thick with loneliness or danger, but instead filled with the scent of dry grass, wildflowers, and the warmth of hope. Everything was simple yet deeply meaningful, a wedding ceremony that was a fusion of Apache and Western traditions. Our small group of guests was all we needed. Doña Elena stood there, tears of happiness rolling down her cheeks. Doc Cooper, who had helped us so much, stood beside her, his face full of pride. And most special of all was the presence of my uncle, Chief Joseph Nightwind. He had traveled a long way to be here, to bless me and Ayana, to let me know that he recognized Cole as a good man. I wore a white dress, embroidered with exquisite Apache patterns by Doña Elena and Ayana. As I walked toward Cole, I saw him standing there in a neat cowboy suit, his hair carefully trimmed. His eyes no longer held the loneliness and weariness they once did, but instead were filled with warmth, love, and a profound happiness. I thought of everything that had happened, from the cruel auction in Tombstone, to the first few days of suspicion on the ranch, to the day I realized I had fallen in love with him. Uncle Joseph performed the Apache wedding ritual, reading blessings and prayers for us. Then, Doc Cooper stepped forward to perform the legal ceremony. Kaya Nightwind, he said, do you take this man to be your husband, to love, honor, and walk with him in the traditions of both your peoples? I do, I said, my voice steady and clear. And Cole Coleman, do you take this woman to be your wife, to love and protect her? I do, Cole said, his voice full of emotion. When Cole kissed me, a sense of peace and completeness spread through my entire body. The cheers of the guests erupted, and I felt Ayana's hand squeeze mine, smiling happily. This was what family felt like. This was what home truly meant. After the ceremony, while everyone was celebrating, Uncle Joseph came to Cole. You have given my nieces something precious, he said. Not just safety or comfort, but the chance to heal and grow. In return, they have given you the same gift. Cole nodded, his eyes full of gratitude. Yes, they have. The road ahead won't be easy, my uncle said. There will be those who oppose what you are building here. I know, Cole replied, but we will face it together. Good, Chief Joseph smiled. Together, that is the Apache way, and now it has become the Coleman way as well. As the celebration continued around us, I stood with my husband and my sister-in-law, looking out at the ranch we were building together. We had started with an act of rescue, a moment of compassion in a world too often ruled by cruelty. Now, we were creating something that could outlast all of us, a place where love triumphed over hatred, where different peoples could live and work together in harmony. This was not the life I had planned when I was brought to Tombstone 6 months ago. It was better. It was a life worth living, worth protecting, worth passing on to future generations. And it had all started with 3 simple words. I'm taking you home. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with a single step of faith. Sometimes family isn't born, but chosen. And sometimes the greatest victories come not from conquering others, but from opening your heart to let others conquer you. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the red cliffs with hues of fire and gold. It was our first autumn at Red Canyon Ranch as a married couple, and the air carried a crispness that hinted at change. Ayana's vision for the ranch had taken root, much like the wildflowers that now dotted the valley. With the $35,000 from the land settlement, we had purchased additional acres, enough to start building a sanctuary not just for us, but for others who had been cast aside by the world's cruelty. The ranch was no longer just a home. It was becoming a beacon of hope. Cole and I worked tirelessly, our hands calloused, but our spirits unyielding. We built a new bunkhouse for those who would come seeking refuge: runaways, freed slaves, and displaced families from tribes like ours. Ayana, with her boundless energy, took charge of organizing the newcomers, teaching them the rhythms of ranch life while weaving in Apache traditions. Doña Elena, ever the heart of the household, ensured everyone was fed and cared for, her laughter a constant melody in the chaos of growth. One evening, as we sat around the fire, a young man arrived, dusty and weary from the road. His name was Tomas, a Mexican vaquero whose family had been driven off their land by a ruthless cattle baron. His eyes, much like Cole's when we first met, carried a familiar weight of loss. "Heard you take in folks who got nowhere else to go," he said, his voice hesitant but hopeful. Cole nodded, extending a hand. "You're welcome here, Tomas. We work hard, but we look out for each other." That night, as Tomas ate with us, I saw Ayana's smile widen. Another soul had found a home. But peace is a fragile thing in a land ruled by greed. Word of our sanctuary spread, and with it came trouble. Ranchers and miners in Tombstone didn't take kindly to our growing community, especially one led by an Apache woman and a white man who dared to defy their ways. Whispers turned to threats, and one morning, a group of riders appeared at the edge of our land. I recognized one of them, Tom Crawford, the mine owner who had bid on us at the auction. His face was twisted with malice, his men armed with rifles. "Coleman," Crawford bellowed, reining in his horse. "You think you can turn this place into a haven for savages and outcasts? This is our territory." Cole stepped forward, his rifle resting casually on his shoulder, but I saw the steel in his eyes. "This is my land, Crawford. Paid for fair and square. You've got no claim here." I stood beside him, my own hand resting on the knife at my belt, ready to defend what we had built. Ayana and Tomas flanked us, their faces resolute. Crawford's men shifted uneasily, but he pressed on. "You're harboring fugitives, Coleman. Hand them over, or we'll burn this place to the ground." My heart pounded, but I spoke before Cole could. "We're no one's property," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "This is our home, and we'll fight for it." The air grew thick, the moment teetering on the edge of violence. Then, from the ridge, came the sound of hoofbeats. Doc Cooper rode in, flanked by the same federal marshals who had arrested Blackwood months ago. "Crawford," Doc called, his voice calm but firm, "you're trespassing on private property. These folks are under federal protection now, thanks to a new land grant. You'd best ride out before you find yourself in irons." Crawford's face reddened, but he knew he was outmatched. With a curse, he wheeled his horse and rode off, his men trailing behind. That night, we celebrated not just our victory, but the strength of our community. Tomas played a lively tune on his guitar, and Ayana taught the children an Apache dance under the stars. Cole pulled me aside, his hand warm in mine. "You were fierce today," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "I had to be," I replied, leaning into him. "This is our home, Cole, our family. He kissed me, and in that moment, I knew we had built something unbreakable. As winter approached, the ranch grew. More people arrived, families, lone travelers, and even a few Apache kin who had heard of our work. We built a schoolhouse where Ayanna taught reading and Apache history, ensuring our culture would not be forgotten. I took pride in training the horses, my bond with them a bridge between my past and this new life. Cole, ever the steady hand, worked on expanding the ranch's defenses, knowing that men like Crawford would not stay quiet forever. One quiet morning, as I walked the fields with Cole, he stopped and looked out at the valley. "Kaya," he said, his voice soft, "when I bought you and Ayanna that day, I thought I was just saving you. But you saved me. You gave me a purpose." I took his hand, my heart full. "We saved each other," I said. "And now we're saving others." The Red Canyon Ranch became more than a place. It became a story, whispered across the territory. A story of two Apache sisters, a white man with a wounded heart, and a Mexican woman who bound us all together. A story of a home built not on blood or conquest, but on love, courage, and the unyielding belief that everyone deserves a chance to heal. As I stood on the porch, watching Ayanna laugh with the children and Cole mend a fence in the distance, I knew this was only the beginning. The world outside might rage with cruelty, but here, in this valley, we were writing a new chapter, one where hope triumphed, where family was chosen, and where the red cliffs stood as silent witnesses to a dream worth fighting for.